So you're on record now.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and. All right. Morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. We have a very special grand rounds this morning that Dr. Guathmy has arranged with two of our very loyal alumni who've come back to provide some of their insights on starting practice. Before I start, I want to just follow up on the email I sent yesterday. I'm incredibly proud of the fact that our residency program was ranked 19th this past week out of over 160 residency programs. We moved from 27 to 19 in 1 year. I have our department annual review with the dean this week, and I was notified that our department is the highest ranked residency program in the entire institution across all residency programs, according to Doximity. So that is the ranking that's used by our dean's office to evaluate the strength of our residency programs. And I think everyone will agree with me that we've moved up the ranks because of Dr. Guathmy's vision and dedication, along with support from Dr. Bachman and David Craig and Mindy Frank, our coordinators, who've really made this special. And one of this grand rounds is an exact example of why I think the visibility of our program has improved tremendously, because of Winston's efforts to broadcast live across the country to our alumni and to engage them. And I want to thank Winston, and I think we should all thank Winston for everything he's done to really improve our exposure and show how tremendous this orthopedic residency training program is from an education standpoint. Some other good news is your workstations are being installed as we speak at the new orthopedic center. So hopefully soon we'll let you know when you all can head over there and start utilizing those. Winston, do you have anything to say? So thanks again. Thanks, and Cap and Chris for being here today. It means a lot to all of them.
So that increase in rankings, I'm not sure it's the intern class, but maybe it is. I don't know. You bring in a good class, who knows? But obviously the recruitment sessions are still going on right now. So we have a big interview day on Thursday. We're going to interview UVA applicants, and then all the applications went out yesterday. The interview offers went out yesterday. So it's been a lot of consternation on Monday. So we got 1,053 applications this year. We whittled it down to 51 invites. So it took a while to get down there. Thank you everybody who reviewed the application. So I'm really excited about sort of the new There you go. Sorry about that, guys. When I started recording the meeting, it muted it, as you are probably aware of. So you guys missed all my awesome conversation there. Is the screen being shared again? It's tough on this because we we're driving two screens right here, and this screen and that screen are connected to each other. So as I was saying, we're very excited to have two good friends of the program, Dr. Cap Eschenroeder, Dr. Chris Young, mentors of all of ours to some degree. They graduated from here back in the mid '80s. Classmates of Dr. D-Dux, or not quite. Mentors of Dr. D-Dux. These are people, when he was a medical student, these people knew Dr. D-Dux, so he wasn't always the man you see before you. So anyhow, Chris from Richmond, Kappa's from Lynchburg, and they're going to give us a little talk here about their career and some guidance for all of you. So I think it's really happy to have you guys here. So thank you so much, Cap.
Yeah, well, great. We're so gratified to be invited, and we look forward to talking to you guys. So I'm Cap Eschenroeder. I graduated from the program in '86. And just to sort of give you a little context, the last time I gave a grand rounds, I was using a 35mm camera, taking pictures out of books. I made 35mm slides. I had cassettes, and pushing the envelope was dual projection. So we're back with new technology.
Yeah, and I'm Chris Young. I finished here in '84. This is the hospital as it was when we arrived. There weren't any big white buildings. At that time, the Cold War was still going on. The Russians were winning. And the first year there, I watched right in the emergency room right there, I watched Miracle on Ice. There were no cell phones. There were no internet. And UVA had never won an NCAA basketball championship. And so we kind of, when we were doing the talk, we were kind of thinking what grounds us to UVA. And for me personally, it is a Gus burger. So I'm a big fan of Gus burgers. They're delicious and nutritious. They keep you regular. And Gus burgers are what probably brought me to UVA in the first place. We just want to say that we have no disclosures or conflicts related to this presentation.
So what we hope to share with you guys today, first, we want to sort of share our perspectives after 30 years of doing orthopedics. And then I'm going to give you some ideas that we think are going to increase your readiness and your resilience and help you deal with the stresses of doing orthopedics. And then we're also going to give you sort of some personal opinions about insights into good decision making and the things that will sort of contribute to your well-being throughout an orthopedic career. So our topics, the first one's going to be your first job, which is a big decision. The second area is managing your life, and our big theme here is team building and how you build teams so that you're successful. The next part is finding your orthopedic voice and giving back. And then we're going to talk a little bit about things that we've been doing at the ends of our careers that we think are interesting. And then we have some closing thoughts on work-life balance. So one thing that we can say is that you guys are really lucky. You just found out that you're rated highly as a residency program. When we came, these guys on the right were our mentors and professors, Dr. Whitehill, Dr. Wong, Dr. Stamp was our chairman, Dr. McHugh, you probably heard his name, Dr. McLaughlin. Mary Clark actually did pediatric orthopedics and was one of the founders of the Ruth Jackson Society. Charlie Franco, people don't remember him very well, but he was an interesting guy, Mike Sussman. We think you guys have like the best faculty, and it's been so gratifying to watch the department grow and become better and better. We think you guys are going to be well trained and well prepared. We know that. You have a really great job. It's amazing that you have the opportunity to do this, but it's hard. Lots of hours and a lot of stress.
So always put your patients first. You guys, this talk is a little different than most of your talks. You all just took the in-training examination, I hear, and there's going to be nothing in this entire talk that's going to be on any of your future in-training examinations. So, but hopefully we have some suggestions going on throughout the talk that you guys are going to find worthwhile. But if you don't find anything else that's worthwhile, this is where it all starts, putting your patients first. We've been doing this for 40 years. We still have a passion for taking care of patients. If you ever lose that passion, you need to find another job.
So we're going to introduce ourselves. And so that's a picture of me in front of the Behringer wing with Joe Moscow and Lamont Wood and my chairman, Dr. Stamp, a million years ago. I left here and went to Hopkins and did a fellowship in joint replacement surgery. And when I was there, they said, where are you going? San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Dallas, what? I said, Lynchburg. They said, whoa, what are you thinking? But I really love Central Virginia, and I enjoyed my practice in Lynchburg. The first part of my career was really sort of building a practice. And the first thing I learned is when I had a really hard shoulder case, I would send him to Richmond, to Chris Young, because he had done a fellowship with Charlie Rockwood. But I was really concentrating on learning how to build a practice, understanding the financial aspects, trying to recruit talent to Lynchburg, which remains an interesting problem, but always orienting the patient a little bit. And we'll keep talking about that when things got confusing. The second part of my career was expanding my interests, and I was very interested in healthcare in our community, so I became a member of the Central Health Board of Directors. I was president of the medical staff. I actually sort of went from local to state to national to the Board of Counselors, and then I came back to local because I found it more engaging. I was very interested in process improvement, so we started this thing called the joint camp. When we started, joints would stay in the hospital 7 to 10 days. And so we tried to standardize things, and we got cohorts of patients that would go through with standard orders, standard data, how they were doing, really trying to improve quality. I really enjoyed that. Went to the MSV and worked on tort reform because that was such a big deal. Throughout my career, I've been sort of growing. So we started out with 3 little practices in Lynchburg, which coalesced, and then Orthopedic Center of Central Virginia, and then on to Ortho Virginia, which is in the state. And I would say all these mergers are like an anthropology experiment. You're taking all these little cultures and combining them. And how do you do that and keep these guiding principles that seem to go from one generation of organization to the next? It's interesting about what really makes a difference. And then finally, I've always been interested in technology. So when I got there was nothing but paper. And the first thing was just to automate the office. That was LComp. Then I got hooked up with NextGen and helped them develop orthopedic software. Then when Ortho Virginia came together, we were the first ambulatory practice to use Epic. It's very expensive. It was a big deal. There was a lot of pushback, like, should we use this thing? And I helped to implement that. And then I became a chief medical information officer.
Yeah, and just to introduce myself, I finished here in '84. And then I owed the Army time, so I went into the U.S. Army. If I could tell a little story and echo a little bit about what Cap said about you guys having an outstanding faculty and being prepared for life. So I left UVA, went straight to Stuttgart, Germany, where I was the only military orthopedic surgeon for 55,000 people. I worked a little tiny hospital that did not have portable X-ray, no MRI, no CT scan, no bone scan, and no ICU. And all I had was a reflex hammer and a stethoscope. And my first night on call, I had a C5-6 bilateral jump block facets and a 21-year-old. And 3 hours later, I had a grade 3A, both bones of the forearm fracture, terribly comminuted, and that was when AO fixation was just in its most primitive forms. And somehow, both of those people turned out really, really good. And I look back all the time and thank my time here for preparing me to do that my first night. So after the Army, I spent a year with Dr. Rockwood in San Antonio, the best orthopedic surgeon I've ever known. And then I moved to Richmond, Virginia, where I joined Western Orthopedics, now Ortho Virginia. You can't go wrong moving to your spouse's hometown. I was fortunate to be on the associate faculty with VCU for about 20 years and worked with the residents, as well as being the head team physician at the University of Richmond, where I've worked with Dave and Winston and all you guys a lot. And then I've been very fortunate to help found 2 medical device companies. So we'll talk about that later on. Now, we'd like to talk about your first job. So this is a big decision. You don't want to make a mistake. It's like getting married. And so we're going to give you our insight. If you'll indulge me just a little bit. This is what I think the world you're going to be going into is going to be like. So it's either going to be a multiple payer system or it's going to be a single payer system. And if it's a multiple payer system, I think, and may not be right, but I think there's going to be like 3 big systems you can join, or something like Ortho Virginia. And one of those is going to be state academic systems. So I think that eventually UVA, VCU, and Eastern Virginia will all merge, they'll all be one system. And that's pretty much already happened in North Carolina. Then there's going to be private healthcare systems like the Mayo Clinic around the country and HCA, big hospital chains like Costco and Walmart, and they'll have lots of orthopedic surgeons that they employ. Thirdly, there'll be HMOs like Kaiser. Consumer Reports always rates Kaiser as the #1 healthcare system. And those are all going to be out there. And then there's going to be independent musculoskeletal groups that are strong enough to survive in that environment. And it's going to be hard. And this map is a company that represents lots of those independent musculoskeletal groups. And as you can see, they're scattered all around the country. And one of those is what we are, is Ortho Virginia. But at any given point in time, the country may just go to a single payer system and the government will run everything, and then all bets are off and you're going to have to find your way there.
So in terms of first job, it's interesting. I did a little research, and nearly half the orthopedic surgeons switch jobs in the first few years. And the most important consideration is practice type. And thinking about that, I think that the first thing you have to do is think a little bit about location. And this is actually based on data from studies that they've done. And family and personal fit are really critical. You're not going to be happy unless your family's happy. Surgeon density, understanding how much competition you're going to be faced with, cost of living, school quality. These are sort of fundamentals. And if you don't get this right, you might not be happy. The next thing to think about a little bit is compensation. And so you really have to sort of look around and make sure that you're getting paid something commensurate with people that are doing work like you. You'll compare, and if you don't get that, you'll become dissatisfied, probably. When I started out, I thought, okay, here's an employment agreement. I've got to get a lawyer. Getting a lawyer is a reasonable thing. But I think things have changed, and pretty much negotiation opportunities with these initial contracts are sort of limited. They're probably not going to make special considerations just for you when you join a big concern. But there are ways that you can negotiate, moving money around, things like your signing bonus, moving expenses, your payback time. Those things are all things that are kind of negotiable. Also, philosophy for compensation. I'm a big believer that there has to be some balance between commonality and productivity. You don't really want to say, I have to worry about the insurance coverage of a patient. That's a terrible thing. At the same time, if you're working like crazy, you need some reward for that. And so where that balance point is an important thing for you to be aware of. And those are questions you should be asking. Now we're getting to things that I think are really, those are fundamental, but like the clinical practice environment. So as in my role with Ortho Virginia, we're onboarding new orthopedic surgeons. I'm very interested in, when you go in, do you get a mentor? Is there somebody that's interested in you, or somebody going to teach you and be there for you? Is there a good onboarding program? Are new doctors, you know, like the seed corn for the organization, or are they just commodities for organizational growth? It's just sort of a philosophy and how they think of you. I think it's really important. You can sort of find out how you're valued. Is there going to be referrals? Are they going to be sent to you? Are you going to have experience helping your clinic, or your first day you're getting the people that are also there first day? Are you getting reasonable OR time? You can ask those questions and get a sense of what the organization is thinking about you. And then much of your time is going to be at work. And so what kind of colleagues, and you need to meet them and get a sense of what they're like. And then finally, I'm a little bit of a philosophical guy, but I think you have to stop and sort of carefully think about what it is that I want, what I want to be, and keep those things front and center in your brain as you deal with all the other particulars. There is data about first jobs. So the AAOS had a census in 2018, and they found out that in the orthopedic residents, only 14% of them felt that they had any adequate training in selecting a first job. So that's one of the reasons we're trying to help you today, so that you guys aren't part of that group. There's a big cost of changing practice locations. There's disruption to your family. This is data about who's doing what, and you can see that in some form, about half the people We're in some private practice. Another group of people is hospital employed, and then academics and military and other stuff. They also did a thing to ask all the people that had changed jobs what were the most important considerations, and they've listed these things like call schedules, etc. All this data is available to you. We're not going to go through it bit by bit, but just be aware that there's data for you, and it's not just anecdotes and stories. And then this sort of points out some resources. If you go to the AAOS website and go to practice management, there are talks on some of the things that we're going to be talking about, et cetera. So once again, educate yourself. Chris and I can't talk about hospital employment because we're not doing that, but there's a good talk about Jack Burke. And we've talked to people who have come to Ortho Virginia dissatisfied with being employed at a hospital. And we know people that are very satisfied. So these are things like non-compete clauses where you get kind of locked in and then your family's living in a certain place and you can't move. Again, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but just be aware that these things are there for you and help you in your consideration.
Yeah, so one of the things that Winston asked us to do was to give some insight into what the private side is, because that's what we are, the Ortho Virginia private side. And so this is what we decided we would make as far as a checklist if you were trying to look at a first job at Ortho Virginia. And so Ortho Virginia is located throughout the state, as you can see. It does have a non-compete clause. So if one of your priorities is to live in Alexandria, Virginia, and you join Ortho Virginia and decide to leave, then there's going to be a fight there. Non-compete clauses are, however, very hard to enforce, but they do empower the group and weaken you as an individual. As far as compensation goes, I think we're very fortunate. I'll talk about this a little bit later on, but we're very fortunate to be in a profession that is well compensated almost no matter where you go. We do have a balance between commonality and productivity, but it varies from different location to location. Lynchburg's more commonality. Richmond is more productivity. We do address certain things though, like Cap mentioned, indigent care, for example. So if we hate the fact that if somebody ever came to the emergency room and said, oh, I hate to be here, this patient doesn't have insurance. And so we pay each other. So if Cap goes in on Friday night to take care of a patient with no insurance, everybody else in the group pays Cap at a Medicare rate for whatever work that he does. There's variation based on specialty, and you should look into that depending on what specialty you go into. Passive income. So the cost of the amount you're getting paid for a total hip replacement or an arthroscopic Vanguard isn't really changing, and if anything, it's going up slightly with some insurances and down with Medicare. So, and with cost of living going up, your basic amount of income that you can make purely doing orthopedics is less. So Ortho Virginia has a lot of passive income, ambulatory surgery centers, MRIs, PT, OT, and bracing for as long as that lasts. There are entrepreneurial opportunities. So in the Richmond area, for example, we have lots of guys who are interested in development of medical technology, and lots of guys who have patents, gone out and gotten patents and work with the industry in that regard. And that's neither encouraged nor discouraged, but you can do it if you want to. The practice environment. So this is my favorite thing about having been with Ortho Virginia is independence. So nobody's telling you how to make your schedule 2 months down the road. So if somebody asks me to do something next week, I can't do it. 2 weeks from now, I couldn't do it. I'm retired now, but now I can do everything. I'm mostly available all the time. But a year ago, I couldn't do something in 2 weeks, but I could do anything I wanted in 2 months. If I want to take Tuesday so-and-so off because Dave Diedick and I were going to play golf with our sons, I can do it. And so it also allowed me to coach all my kids' basketball teams. So I could be at a YMCA at 5 o'clock and I could just make my schedule out however I want it. So you have that is one of the biggest advantages, I think, of Ortho Virginia.
Can I ask a question for these guys? Can you give them some kind of an idea of what your passive income is compared to your patient revenue income as a portion of your total pay? Just a ballpark.
You're an admin.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could, I'm not a quant guy, but it's significant. So I would say, I can come back to you guys with better numbers, but it's substantial. It's probably like 30%, 40%, et cetera. And then there's also all these formulas about how things are allocated based on how you're working. Sometimes if you're not working enough, do you still retain your first full share of ancillary income? We have things so that people continue to do it. I would say that these contracts and arrangements and formulas vary throughout your career. And so hopefully you come in and you start to say, okay, this place has the right ethos and ethic, and then you start to contribute and say, we got to make sure that we recruit and retain the best people, and we want a compensation thing that's fair, and we want to have the right sort of ethics. We're talking about people that don't have insurance. We want everybody to feel good about what they're doing. So yeah, but it's substantial. And I'm going to interrupt Chris for 1 second and tell you that back in the 1980s, you could do a joint replacement and you got paid a fair amount of money, and all you had to do was joint replacements and you were fine. And then over the years, the AHA, the Hospital Association kept lobbying, and they would get incremental 1.5% bumps in what you got paid for doing work for Medicare, et cetera, in the hospital. And we were getting nothing. And so over time, we got out lobbied and things have changed in terms of the way the government use it. And so now we're sort of worth more to the hospital than we are to ourselves. And that means that when you do work for a hospital, you're generating a lot of contribution margin, a lot of stuff that goes to the institution. That's the reason when you go to a hospital employee, you get an RVU rate that's way above market. So anyway, just be sort of aware that ancillary income is a big deal in private practice, and you got to understand how it works, and it's a substantial amount, and that's what makes you competitive.
So, Cap,
Go ahead.
I was just saying that there was some data released not too long ago from non-CON states about passive income to orthopedic practices who have ownership in ASCs and therapy, and it's about 30%. So
30 to
about the
40
average.
was what I was
National-
thinking.
National is about
Good
30%.
for you. Data is so much better than anecdotes.
No, but you're consistent with the national average.
Thank you.
What about the cost of all of that though? I mean, that's shared by the group, right? But you take on this cost and debt of buying the MRI to the.
Yeah, so there's all these
from that.
business things where you say, okay, we're going to do a pro forma, we're going to have a new MRI in Virginia, need a COPN, can we get it? So these are things that different active members of the group tend to work on, and people will take on projects and try to get that done, and then later you say, hey, this has really worked. So back to Chris.
Yeah. Right. So there's different cost centers is the bottom line, and each one of the cost centers kind of works independently to some degree. We think there's advantages, by the way, to these things, that we think that there isn't abuse of that by doctors ordering too many studies, and we think that you can provide extremely high quality care at cheaper than the private hospitals that we work at, much cheaper than the private hospitals we work at, equal or better care than, and certainly in terms of value relative to cost at physician-owned centers. So back to practice environment. So you have the opportunity for high satisfaction in patient care. You can pretty much do what you want to do. If you want to do bread and butter orthopedics, you can. If you want to do complicated hip revision surgery, you can do that. And you have pretty much full independence on who you hire. So you can hire your own assistant and scribe, and so you can build a team, which we'll talk about later. You can have an academic affiliation if you want, and be as involved as you want. It takes time away from your practice, so you have to decide how much you want to do it, but you can do it if you want. And you work really hard because you're productivity based, the overhead is very high, and you work really hard. So you're there, a lot of hours. All right.
We're going to shift gears and we're going to talk about managing your life. And so one of our themes is, and I've taught this to my kids, you're really going to need great teams to be successful. And we're going to talk a little bit about your office or your clinic team and how you're the person who's directing how that functions. You need to be a master and make sure that your patients have a great experience. The OR team is so important to me to have reliable people that you're working with consistently so you get great outcomes. And then we're going to talk a little bit about your personal and family team And I think there's 4 components: some sort of financial planning, an accountant, insurance expert, and a legal attorney. So Chris.
All right, so we're gonna talk about 3 teams: office team, surgical team, home team, and we'll talk about your office team work first. So a lot of this is very basic, but you all know that office or clinic, whichever you call it, is hard work. And you all are now being rated. So we were there, we weren't being rated except by, our faculty might see how we're doing, but now you're getting rated by health grades. Ortho Virginia has their own independent internal rating system, and you're getting rated all the time. So it increases the stress of the office, and you're late from surgery, or you're rushing in the morning, and you've added on 2 people because people called last night that you added on. And so when you arrive at work, it can be a stressful situation. So even though your office may actually look like that when you come in, you feel like everybody in the country is there waiting to see you. And it causes high stress and high anxiety level, not with you, but with your staff too. A few real simple pleasantry guidelines. The first one is when you come in the morning, just say good morning to everybody. This is a classic thing in the US Army. Everybody comes in and they say good morning to everybody. And Mark Miller was in the Air Force with me when I was in San Antonio, and same thing. Good morning. It's very simple. It puts everybody at ease. And it just, as opposed to coming in and saying, who's in room 4 and who's in room 8 and who should I see first? And number 2, I want to say a few words. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Dr. Rockwood and Dr. Hawkins today, who were mentors to me over the years. Dr. Hawkins of Stephen Hawkins Clinic, you all are familiar with him. I think you could argue that he's certainly, if not the top, one of the top most respected members of the American Shoulder and Elbow Society. And he gave his goodbye speech to the American Shoulder and Elbow Society 2 years ago. And he spent 10 minutes of his hour talking about, the names of the people you work with. And so I've tried to do that throughout my career. Art was the cast tech when we were at UVA, and Mary ran our clinic. And it's just really helpful to, besides knowing your own scribe and your own medical system, but knowing the names of the radiology technicians, the people at the front desk, the people who, to use Dr. Hawkins' words, the people who clean the floor. Obviously, you can't keep up with everybody's name all the time. We know that, but it's obvious whether you're making an effort or not, and it helps build a team. All right, so now Dr. Rockwood, always say yes first. So this is one of my mantras I've tried to live with throughout my life. When somebody calls you up, the natural tendency is you're busy, and they call you up, they say, you see this, it's a hand problem. Well, I don't do hand, I'm a shoulder doctor. And a better answer, I think, is to say yes. And one of the stories with Dr. Rockwood is we were in the clinic one day and had our usual busy day, and he got a call from this doctor, orthopedic surgeon from out of state. And he said, Dr. Rockwood, I have a terrible patient. They have a really difficult problem. They're unpleasant to deal with. They've sued 2 of the previous doctors that they've worked with, and went on and on. And Dr. Rockwood said, yes, we're happy to see that patient. Here's Chris, he'll get him in. And so afterwards, about a little while later when we had him in, I said, Dr. Rockwood, you have a 3-month waiting list for patients and 6 months for surgery. I said, you didn't have to see that guy. Why'd you do it? And he just goes, well, I'm a shoulder doctor. That's what I do. And so say yes first, and it puts the other person at ease and just makes and leads to better patient care. A couple other things, run on time. So some of my partners never run on time. They're always an hour behind. So they're just scheduling too many patients per hour, right? And then they run late every day. If they know they're gonna run late, just schedule yourself to run late. It's easy to run on time just by scheduling. Obviously, you're gonna get behind once in a while, but if you don't, say you're sorry. Next one is when the last pleasantry, instead of rushing out of the office, gotta go, say goodbye and thank everybody on your way out. It's simple things. It builds a team of people who want to work with you. The other thing that CAP really emphasized in the course of this is choreography. So everybody on your team needs to know what they're going to do, what their role is, who calls who fills out this form. And so you want to pay attention to that so that you have an efficient team. And now, thanks to Ortho Virginia CAP, you can get tons of data. So a lot of my partners don't like the data because it shows that they're making patients wait too long and things like that. And you can look at it that way, or you can embrace the data and say, okay, this is what I'm doing wrong, or this is where I can improve, and then go back to your team and work together and make it better with an ultimate goal of a better patient experience and well-being, happy people, and better documentation. All right, operating routine. So surgery is hard work, right? And if you're a total joint doctor, a total knee doctor, you want to do 8 total knees a day. And that's in many ways good, because there's tons of data out there that says the more volume you do, the better job you do, as opposed to somebody who does 2 total knees a month. And so we're trying to do that, but frequently it can seem like the operating room is working against you. Me, one time, we started at 8:15 one day, 45 minutes late, just because we had a fly in the room. And we were running around with fly swatters before we could kill it for 45 minutes. And it's easy to get frustrated and mad. And sometimes it's somebody's fault. And so you want to build a team. And it's a little harder in the operating room because the OR staff doesn't work for you, right? They work for the hospital or maybe a surgical center. But you're still the leader. So your behavior and the way you approach things is going to pervade to everybody on your team. And you set a standard, maybe not the standard, but initial 2 cents in the operating room. But going back to choreography, operating rooms are a little more set. One of the things that Cap and I agree on is how well your cases go is mostly dependent on things that happen before you go in the operating room. So we all know that if we've got a case that's big, that you're going to spend the night before reading on it. You're going to call up, I'll call Dr. Dietrich and say, hey, you've done this case. What can you tell me to do so my case goes better? But if you extrapolate it beyond yourself, it's also good to tell the nurses that you're going to have this case, that these are the things you might need and the anesthesia they might need in the wake of the patient. And even if you're just nervous about a case, it's good to tell the people you're going to be working with that you're nervous about the case, because they're going to help you and they're going to want to do it. They went into their job for a reason. So the goal of that is a better patient experience, better procedures, better turnover, fewer complications. All right, we didn't want to put in this slide. So overall, if you had to say, what is the biggest challenge that we face, because it's a downer, is bad outcomes. And we just didn't want to be a downer, but you're going to have bad outcomes. All of you are going to have bad outcomes. I've had them, Cap's had them. Some of them are your fault, and some of them aren't your fault. And I remember as a resident, I can saying, oh, I hope I get to see a complication here so I can see how he gets out of it or she gets out of it. And but the day you walk out of your residency, you don't want to see any more complications. You just want everything to go smooth. And this is Cap's term, but we agree on it, is run toward your complications, okay? So when these bad things happen, I'll just tell you, it's human nature. You don't want to see those people. You want to just leave them in the waiting area and hope they go somewhere else. But you need to do exactly the opposite. You need to give them your cell phone. Make yourself totally available. When they show up, you get them back to the room right away. Spend whatever time you need to do with them. And in the long run, not only are you less likely to get sued, but your outcome is going to be better in the long run.
It's the only relief you get. Your imagination goes wild. You think, oh my gosh, I wonder what's happening with that person. You run towards them, you see them frequently. They're gracious. They want to get better. They make you feel better. So it's counterintuitive, but it's mission critical. Keep going.
Yeah. So one other thing, just from the patient care point of view, just do what's right. Sometimes it's hard to look somebody in the eye and say, you got to go back in the hospital, but if that's what's right. You just have to do it. From a personal point of view, it causes you tons of stress. You can't sleep. You just go home and you think about it and try to think about something else. You fall asleep and you wake up thinking about it again. And it's this current loop. So it can be a really hard thing to deal with. So, but know that everybody, all your other friends are go through it too. And so you can lean on your colleagues, you can lean on your teams. Some people compartmentalize and leave it at work. I think if you're a musculoskeletal tumor specialist, you have to be able to do that, because otherwise empathy tear you apart. And at the end of the day, our take-home point is forgive yourself. We all make mistakes, and just do everything you can to minimize the outcome, minimize the problems of the outcome.
And it all works out. You'll have more happy patients than patients with complications. What we're really talking about with these team things is you guys setting the tone. So you can show up and say, I'm in clinic, et cetera, but you're actually in charge of that. And you should actually be in charge of that. Prep your teams, et cetera, you'll do better. Home team, we're going to run through these things pretty quickly, but we sort of think that you need like a financial planner, fee only. This won't be a finance lecture, but I'm going to give you some fundamentals. You must assemble this team. And when you have this team, you're going to do better, and a lot of your fundamentals are going to be met. Finance, you really want the goals is to live a good life within your means and not get over in debt, et cetera. Security for your family. If there's an emergency, you can deal with it without going into debt. And then plan for retirement. What's your number? What's that mean? What your number means, what's your net worth at the end of your career that allows you to retire. If you know that number, you can sort of calculate backwards and see if you're making it and you're getting closer. When I started, my parents did such a good job giving me a work ethic, et cetera, but they weren't very versed in financial planning. And my dad came to the end of his life and he didn't really have much for retirement. So when I got a salary, I said, what am I going to do? Am I going to pay off debt? Am I going to invest? What am I supposed to do with this? And so I started educating myself. The first book I read was this one, which is old, but it's really good. And it's a lot of blocking and tackling. And it talks about emergency funds and some just fundamentals, things that might not be at your fingertips. Then I read this, which was John Bogle, who started Vanguard. It sort of helped me with the science of mutual funds and investing and numbers. And I'm not a quant guy, but it helped me a lot. And this is a book, The White Coat Investor, that my kids are reading. And it also teaches you a little bit about this. Again, we'll be brief, but investing principles. This is a little bit of personal opinion, but I think it's true. You want to avoid high-cost brokers. You go to Surgeon's Lounge and somebody tells you about the newest hot investment. You wait 3 years, they go down in flames. This is pretty simple. Great investments are boring. You just sort of set them and they just work. But anyway, you want low-cost mutual funds. The important thing is diversification and asset allocation. You do well not because of the fabulous security you pick, because you understand asset allocation. And early in your life, you say, I need a lot of money in things that grow fast like stocks. And that's your time horizon. And later, you're going to put more things in defensive, things like cash and bonds, so that you can weather a storm because your time horizon is shorter. And the risk and reward is all controlled with the, hang on a second, with the asset allocation. And then financial awareness. You need some way of knowing how you're doing. And so I've actually got 30 years of data about how I'm doing. You need to know the expenses. You get accounts all over the scattered, world. How do you put that together and see what the big picture is? You need something that shows you. You can use like the wire cutter to find these things. The thing on the upper left is Quicken. It's teaching you about budgeting, et cetera. Your metric is net worth. It's not what did this one fund do last year. It's like, how is my net worth progressing? And you track that year over year and you begin to know, and you know if that's getting close to your number. It's pretty simple. And then the thing at the bottom right is an asset allocation thing. If you can have an all in and you know where your stuff is, then you actually sort of know how you're doing. You don't have to be smart. So, you don't have to spend your time worrying about investing. You're going to have enough to think about doing orthopedic surgery and mastering that amazingly complex craft. So compounding, Einstein is telling us that he who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays it. And that's like, be thinking about how much debt you have, et cetera. And you can see the graph on the left where the principal, then the interest, and the compound interest. It's chump change at the beginning, and it's a huge amount of money at the end, and you don't have to be a genius. And this is from Bogle, where he's talking about the internal triangle of investing, which is risk and reward. Everybody talks about that, but he talks about cost. And this shows you $10,000 investment over 20 or 30 years. The amount that you're paying to have the money managed has tens of thousands of dollars of impact. So you really want to have a long time horizon. So risks and solutions. Emotional, non-disciplined approach is a risk. Costs are a risk. Inflation, interest rate, economic cycles are risks that you can't control. You can only control the top two. And the solutions are discipline and simplicity. Stay the course. Don't jump around when things get turbulent. Time is your friend. Compounding. Regression to the mean means that the people that come to you and say that I can really do a great job and make you a truckload of money because I'm so smart, don't. If you give them 4 to 5 years, they regress back to the mean, and almost nobody can beat the bogey of the market. It's really hard to do, but they won't tell you that. And you should know your expense ratio. I know my expense ratio for all my investments, and a little bit less than that. So that's a pretty good metric in terms of being efficient. And then we all think we're really smart and we can figure anything out, and we can, but behavioral economics teaches you that we're all subject to these things. Confirmation bias. This actually tells me something I already believe. I love it. Sunk cost effect. So just be aware. I asked Andrew, my son, what should I talk about? And he said, these guys will have been on call. They're going to do an operation. Just give them 5 things. So here are my 5 things, the fundamentals for your sort of personal well-being. Have a will. You need disability insurance that moves with you instead of your employer. Neither of my boys did this without me, and my daughter without me explaining it to them. Life insurance, you need to insure your insurability. You say, don't really maybe need it right now, but you don't know what's going to happen to you next. Debt management, learn how not to live off of credit cards. I did some of that. And then begin thinking about your future. And even if you put a dribbling amount in it, open a Roth IRA, it'll teach you about mutual funds and diversification. The 6 financial errors that doctors make: poor debt management, inadequate savings rate, inappropriate tax management, personal and professional divorce, wrong insurance, and expensive investing. So in the end, you don't want to be like this guy sitting on his pile of gold worried about money. You want to be like these guys who have been freed from financial concerns, and they're collaborating and doing interesting things. You don't want to be the dragon. Insurance, choose carefully here. Chris and I both think that insurance can be a racket. You got to watch it. You just realize that these are commodities, not investment vehicles. Disability policy in life, we talked about. Umbrella, you're going to be a high worth individual at some point. You have to have some insurance against people suing you. Health is through work, home and car, property, or table stakes. Just make sure you get high deductibles. You don't want to be like these guys that are shipwrecked, and the insurance agent is the guy on the left looking at you like a fat hamburger. So pick carefully. And insurance is for catastrophes, and control the costs. And also the definitions are important. You think you're covered, you go and you find out you're not covered. So this is where the expert helps. Briefly, an accounting team, your taxes are going to go up. It's complicated with S Corp, C Corps, et cetera. You need somebody to help you. And your legal team, you can do things like make sure you got a good will. You can plan like trust for education for your kids. There's a lot of complexity here. The deal is you need trusted advisors. Get these 4 trusted advisors, figure it out. Perhaps they talk to one another, and then pretty soon you feel like not everybody's got this figured out, and I don't. I'm happy. I can think about other things. In my mind, Abraham Maslow was the guy in 1943 that was a positive psychologist. He talked about a hierarchy of needs. Watching lots of people go through their orthopedic careers, this makes a lot of sense to me. At the very bottom of the pyramid is your basic needs. And if you don't have those met, you're not going to be at the top of the pyramid with self-actualization. And so same thing applies to us as orthopedic guys. Oops. And one of the things that I thought is you start at the bottom and you ascend to the top of the pyramid. And when you're at the top of the pyramid, you're people like Mahatma Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Bobby Chabra, Chris Young. But actually you don't. You go up to the top, and then sometimes because of bad decisions, et cetera, you come back down to the middle. And so don't create a self-imposed wolf at the door with bad decisions. And again, I'm a philosophical guy, and Aristotle said that happiness is actualization of your best creative abilities. And the whole point of all that I've just told you is said that all those things at the bottom of the pyramid are well conceived, well figured out, et cetera, and you can spend more time at the apex of the pyramid.
So our take-home point about managing your life is to be a lifelong learner in terms of team building. If your office is not running the way you want, well, build a team. And if your OR isn't working the way you want, build a team. And in your home life, same thing, build a team of people, except make sure you invest 95% of your money in low cost, diversified mutual funds. And that's a,
You can play around with 5% if you like Vegas.
play around with a little extra. So be a lifelong learner and team building. All right, so Cap has just spent time telling you how to make all this money. And I am now going to tell you how to give it all away. So giving back. So we believe that it's a responsibility of us to help shape the future of musculoskeletal care. There's lots of ways to give back, but two of them are your time and your expertise and donations, just giving away money. So time and expertise. So the most obvious is the people in this room out in the virtual world out there, which is your academic faculty. They've given their whole life society, which Cap and I have been involved in a lot, mission trips, and this list goes on and on. And then there's a million places you can donate money to, just to mention a couple of them. You have your UVA Orthopedic Alumni Fund. So Dave Diduck sold me this tie, my UVA Orthopedic Alumni tie, Cap's wearing one too, for an auction for only $1,000. So any of you all want to buy a tie, you might want to see Dave. Price might have gone up a little bit by now. But
Substantially, they've gone up.
only $1,000.
Got a building to pay for it.
And then there's political action committees. There's also OREF and research funds and a million other things. But the two things that I have picked out to talk about are the American Board of Orthopedic Surgery and political action committees. So I'm going to tell you guys another story, and I want you guys to go home tonight and feel happy about it. So the American Board of Orthopedic Surgery can cause us a lot of anxiety because they can take away your certification, right? And it also costs a lot. And some of my partners think it's just a racket for them to make money. But first of all, the American Board of Orthopedic Surgeons is a group of unpaid doctors, and I'm not on the board or anything. It's a group of unpaid doctors, and their mission is to ensure the quality of orthopedic care. So now a story. So going back in time to the 70s, we got there in the 80s, so we saw this happening. The American Board of Orthopedic Surgery felt like lots of orthopedic surgeons being trained in America were not of adequate quality. And they decided to address that. They also, as an aside, saw all these projections that there was going to be a excess of orthopedic surgeons, a large excess by 2010. So they went out and reviewed every orthopedic surgery program in the country. And in Virginia, there was UVA and VCU, which at the time had 4 residents each. But there was also one in Northern Virginia, which had 4 residents each, and one in Eastern Virginia, which had 4 residents each. And they felt like the comprehensive teaching and research and everything at those 2 programs was not adequate, and they eliminated those programs. And by around 1980, they had eliminated 1/3 of orthopedic programs in the country. So as a result of that, today, I think orthopedic surgeons are the highest quality trained specialty in the country. And each of you should go to bed every night and thank the American Board of Orthopedic Surgeons that you're part of a community, a lean community of highly qualified and orthopedic surgeons, because there's just hardly any bad ones out there. It's amazing. So that's my 2 cents for the American Board of Orthopedic Surgery. Now, political action committees. So one of the things that's going to be going on the rest of your life is that every year it's going to seem like the government has come out and there's more regulations and more paperwork to do and more this and more that and more less pay and dun. It's going to constantly be just feel like it's hammering you over your head. Well, those things come from 2 places. One is the state government and one is the US government. So the state government handles things here like malpractice, whether there's a cap or not, scope of practice, whether podiatrists should be allowed to do total knee replacements, Medicaid, and the US government handles your Medicare payment schedule, CPT codes, and telehealth and things like that. So there are political action committees for both of those, and they are in Virginia, the VOS, Virginia Orthopedic Society, and MSV, and the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, Association of Orthopedic Surgeons nationally. And the bottom line is, if you're not at the table, you're not on the menu. So they are our voice at all these legislative sessions. And so money matters. So as Kat mentioned, you know, different things are affecting us in terms of quality of care and like how big should malpractice be and things like that. And in Virginia, trial lawyers in 2020 gave 110,000, the hospital system 86,000, VOS 20. So we're outgunned at 3 to 1 at a national level. So Ortho Virginia, every doctor in Ortho Virginia donates to both the AOS PAC and MSV PAC every year. And we think that's just an important thing to think is just part of your overhead.
It's hard to do this. You're really busy, et cetera. People want you to be involved and you say, I don't have time, but you have to sort of think about shaping the future for you and your colleagues. Keep going.
Right. And it's not tax deductible. So it's just something you have to do. So I put Cap's picture here because he's the one who really got me involved in it. So we recommend call on you to have a personal relationship with legislators. One time when I was the president of the VOS, I had to go downtown and I ended up talking to this legislator downtown in Richmond, which is where, you know, Virginia capital is. And I was talking with the legislator and he was the deciding vote to give the optometrists the right to do examinations and prescriptions for glasses that the ophthalmologist had fought. And every year he'd always voted with the ophthalmologist. And I was talking to him, I said, so why did you vote for the optometrist this time instead of the ophthalmologist? And he said, I had 40 optometrists in my office and 1 ophthalmologist. So if you're not there,
just be aware.
Just be aware.
It's for later in your career.
All right.
So philanthropy, the very last thing you're thinking about, and just like I told you, there are ways to do all the financial stuff well, there's ways to do this well. Think about structure. You're going to hopefully inform your family, et cetera. I was a charter member to this thing. It's called the Vanguard Charitable Endowment. And basically, it's a smart way to do it. You can take highly appreciated securities, plop them in there. They continue to grow. It gives you structure, so you're funding the same things year after year, and it's not just answering letters that come to your mailbox. It makes you feel really good that you're bringing some structure, just like you are to your finances, to your philanthropy. So now we're going to talk about some unique interests, and I've been really interested in data and data driving quality and process and all that stuff. It's the reason I'm doing all this informatics, et cetera. I don't think of the EHR as electronic paper. I think of it as our neural network and how we communicate with each other, how we get data about how we're doing. And I would say the future in terms of this is incredible. In the old days, you could never get a database on your patients, et cetera, unless you went to extreme effort. And it's getting easier. And Chris is going to tell us a little bit about technology development and challenging the status quo. So this guy is a guy that I'm interested in, Deming. He was involved in manufacturing in the 1980s. He was a very structured guy with process improvement. He said, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. with that data, you're just another person with an opinion. But just like the gal at the bottom right, when you measure, sometimes it makes you a little nervous. You don't want to look bad. At the same time, if you look bad now and you start to attack it, in 2 years, you're going to look great, just like your program got great ratings. That doesn't just happen, you know, through entropy. So we know that orthopedic EHR users are terribly dissatisfied. And so on the left is a thing from Melnick where he talks about it, and the right is a list of all the medical subspecialties and specialties, and orthopedics is at the bottom of the list. They don't like using the EHR. So when I was at Epic, when I started my journey as a CMIO, I met this guy named Taylor Davis, a really interesting guy. He was starting this thing called the Arch Collaborative. Now it's 250 organizations. It's international. It's such an interesting thing to be able to understand how things like healthcare models in different countries impact doctors, their satisfaction, their ability to see their patients efficiently, et cetera. It was really interesting to me. And they ask these EHR satisfaction questions. So if you look at this thing on the right, it's a tornado, and it's basically all these responses from 250 organizations from around the world about, is this EHR helping you? Is it a pain in the butt? Is it a sea anchor? Is it something that actually you like? Like, do you like it? Yeah, do you like indoor plumbing? It's helping me. So we measured in 2017 when I started doing this with OV, and we were not very good. And we measured again after implementing some process changes in 2018, and we had the biggest jump in the Arch Collaborative anywhere, OV. Pretty exciting. Then we measured again in 2020, and we're in the 94th percentile of satisfaction. So for me, that was a pretty interesting journey. And just not to have a big lecture on this, but what moves the needle? It turns out that it's 22% the EHR vendor, and Epic is the best. The organization accounts for 18%, but the individual and how much you commit to being a master in your clinic, a master of running your clinic, that's what increases your satisfaction. And we did some things at Ortho Virginia, like we had provider support specialists, people that come to you and stand behind you and help you. A great sign of good EHR governance is, who do you go to when you're stuck? If the answer is, oh, it's Jonathan, he's such a nice person. If it's, I submit a ticket and to avoid and it disappears and I never hear anything else, that's not very good governance. And then, so responsive and governance engage providers. When I did this thing for Ortho Virginia, actually, to me, as we all came together, and I told you about groups coming together and all the varied cultures, the EHR was the one thing that we had in common. To me, it was sort of an agent of enculturation. It was how you could take these guys in Richmond, Northern Virginia, Lynchburg, Virginia Beach, and sort of have them all having some commonality. So I taught this idea of provider mastery, which we're trying to talk to you about with team building, cultural readiness for change, incivility, you know, not a lot of screaming and bad behavior. And then when somebody helps you, you should be grateful, and you should find a way to contribute and help your peers around you. It just creates a nice environment. I wrote an opinion piece, which you can read about this. And then these are some of the slides that I showed to my colleagues, et cetera, explaining orthopedic surgeons to other subspecialties. And when I went to Alaska, I went to the bottom of Denali, and there was a little type thing, and it said, when you get on the side of this mat, you can't call for help. Survival is your personal responsibility. So I use that talking to my other orthopedic colleagues about personal agency, personal responsibility. When you're on the side of a mountain and things aren't working, you don't start screaming and getting mad. You actually get resourceful. You try to help the people around you, and they try to help you. So we try to teach that culture.
Right. All right. Last thing before closing thoughts. So challenge the status quo. So when I finished training, when I finished my career, the only operation that I was doing the same way that I was trained when I was back at UVA was a shoulder manipulation. Everything changes, and all the operations y'all are learning right now, you're going to be doing differently in 10 years or 20 years. It's all going to change. It's amazing how little we know. I used to show patients the AOS practice guidelines all the time, and you just go down the thing. There's very few things with level 1 evidence. Lots, even things like cortisone shots, we don't know about. And again, one last little reference to Dr. Hawkins when he gave his hour talk. The only book that he said that everybody should read is this book called Snowball in a Blizzard, which is a physician's way of looking at medical uncertainty. And the guy's a really smart guy. At the end of the book, he kind of says, he's talking about viruses, and he says, well, if there's ever a SARS virus, I think that's going to be really bad. And sure enough, here we are with masks on, right? So someone out there is going to improve care. Somebody's going to be making those steps forward so that your equipment's better, your technology's better. All that's going to happen. And you can either choose to be a part of it or go along with it. It's up to you. One of the ways that you're probably doing it now in places is research. And so that's a great way. If you take a problem statement and then a question, and you answer the question, you can improve the care of tens of thousands of people by answering a question. Whereas if otherwise you're doing it one operation at a time. But another way to do it is technology development. And that starts with a problem statement. So a problem statement is like the tuberosities don't attach back to shoulder replacements well when for a fracture, or the alcohol prep solution takes too long to dry. And so I'm sitting around waiting to start my operation. And so things like that, you can just tell somebody, well, this prep solution takes too long to dry, and the rep will take it back to their company and they may get a patent and figure out how to get a chemist, and then they'll come back with a better prep solution, and you're better off. You can address it too. You can look into yourself, and you can, if you have a good idea, you can patent it. If you want to know more about patents, there are lots about patents, and I'm happy to talk with them about them, but it's beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about today. But lots of guys in my group get patents. And you can start a company. This needs a team, and it's a little bit of right place, right time. But I will tell you, so we started one company, which was the most exciting time of my professional life in 1999. And we felt at the time the rotator cuff repairs could be performed arthroscopically, because 99+% of them were open procedures at that time. And we formed a company, and we had a solution to that problem, which has now changed, but it was mainstream at the time. We did another company now with dialysis AV fistula. So it's a way that you can improve the care of tens of thousands of people instead of one at a time. All right, closing thoughts.
Yeah, so closing thoughts for me is when you're confused, orient to the patient. There'll be all kinds of things like gain sharing things. Should I sign this contract? What about ASC? Is that a good thing? Ambulatory surgery center. And every time I get conflicted or confused, if I just say, is this really going to be good for my patients? It's so clarifying. And believe me, it can get confusing. Stay true to your values. I said earlier, be intentional, think about what's really important to you, take the time to figure it out, and then keep staying true to those things. And we've seen our colleagues, most of our colleagues do great. Some of our colleagues kind of go off the rails, and we're trying to give you sort of the fundamentals that will sort of immunize you from burnout or disaffection, or just keep you happy through a long and stressful career. I think that the relationship between a surgeon and a patient is a sacred trust. Sometimes patients get transactional, particularly with health grades, et cetera. They say, we see you're highly rated, and I just mission critical and keep you out of a lot of trouble. They're transactional patients and they're transactional doctors. I had a college friend, his wife went for a hip replacement. She was the very worst one for a resurfacing. She got it, it was a disaster. And the guy kind of dropped her and just said, you know, I don't really do revisions or something. I mean, I'm being hyperbolic here, but don't be transactional. Prioritize your family. I think that's really, we all have different sort of family setups. We're not, you know, saying one thing is right, but it's a big deal and it'll sustain you. Be patient. Charlie Frankel told me that. He said, don't go out and buy the biggest doggone house. And all my partners bought the biggest house and they're fine. But the whole point is just be patient and, you know, you'll just do better. Then finally, you're lucky. I mean, I just feel like orthopedics is the most fun thing to do ever. It's very stressful, but it's so rewarding. So be grateful and contribute back and share what you're getting.
All right, and my closing thoughts. Number one, when I would be in the OR and we'd have a tough decision to make, our rule was always treat every patient as if they were your son or daughter. If you're in your office, you're in a hurry, and all of a sudden you're looking at them and you're trying to get out of there, Well, if they were your son or your daughter, you wouldn't be in a hurry. You would just take the time. So it's been a good rule of thumb throughout my life. You guys, though, need to connect with patients in new ways because of the internet and blogs and all those things like that. And I think that if I was starting out today, that's what I would do. I would learn how to relate to my patients and my family doctors using modern technology. Next one, be able to defend every decision you make. It's just a great rule of thumb for life. Whether you're coaching a YMCA team and wondering, and mom asks you, why didn't you put in Julie? You need to be able to defend every decision you make, because sooner or later you're going to get asked. And I think, so if a coach would ask me, for example, why are you doing the operation on Thursday instead of Tuesday? I didn't just start explaining I'm doing it on Thursday because of this reason. I would say, my job is to be able to defend every decision I make. And then I would tell them why I was doing it on Thursday instead of Tuesday. And then my last thing is one last little story, I apologize, is you need to decide what's important in your life. And so when I was at UVA, my last year, I lived on a little pond right at the bottom of Monticello Mountain. And when I would come home, I was still single at the time. I'd asked some girls, but nobody had said yes. And I would walk home. I mean, I'd get home and I'd walk around the pond and I'd throw in this purple worm as I walked around, even though I wasn't really a fisherman, it just was relaxing for me. And I'd catch these 1 pound bass most nights. And so fast forward 20 years, it's the most stressful time of my life. I was still working with Richmond. I was on the board of my group. I was taking call every 5th night. And I was
president of the VOS.
Yeah, president of the VOS. And I was coaching 4 YMCA basketball teams. And this guy, this patient of mine was a rotator cuff, had done really well. He was on the Bassmasters tourney. He knew about me fishing here. And he said, if you let me pick you a day in April, I will guarantee you catch an 8 pound bass. And it was something I really wanted to do, but I was stressed out. And I walked out in the hall, and at the other end of the hall, Dr. Blake Dennis, one of my partners, was talking too loud to this patient. And he went and he said too loud, you can't kiss every girl at the dance. And I listened to him. I know that was God talking to me. And I went to my office and I said, what's important in my life? And what was important to me when I sat down, and it still is, was my family and my friends, my work, and then I like to play golf and the guitar. And those were the important things, and fishing wasn't one. So I went back in the room and I told him, thank you so much, but I can't do it. And so time is going to be one of the most important things, and time management is going to be a huge thing in your life. And if you decide what's important, it helps you with that process.
And so finally, our closing thought is make time for your family, and we all have different ideas of how that's going to be, and your friends, et cetera. We're not saying one thing or another, but I had fishing trips with each one of my kids where it was their year. We had a family adventure vacation every other summer. We went to some place that taxed us and was not just relaxing. And Chris has done the same thing. We think your family is the best team you're going to build, and your friends. And you need to pay attention to that so that you can survive. And so with that, thank you for listening to us. It's been fun to have this opportunity to meet with you guys. And if you have any questions, we're glad to sort of answer them.
Any questions from the crowd?
So I think I'm one of the chiefs, and so thinking about jobs, and you all mentioned that, just how important it is. And I think we get a very skewed perception because we've only been exposed to academic medicine so far. I think one of the big things, at least for me, it's scary going into private practice is joining a group where it's very much eat what you kill. There's a lot of competition. You're constantly being a new person in town that you're going to have a hard time getting going, and everyone's going to be not trying to help you. If you have a difficult case, that you're not going to have practice partners that are willing to discuss those cases with you. How do you how do you see that when you're trying to look at a practice and make sure that you don't join a practice that you're going to be miserable at, or that has those mentors?
Chris and I are chomping at the bit, but Chris is going to go first. Go ahead.
Well, all those people ahead that you're going to go into practice with are like the people in this room 5 years from now. And so everybody's going to try to help you. You're not going to, if you have a difficult case, everybody's going to listen, everybody's going to pitch in, everybody's going to come and do operations with you. That I would take that, not worry about that at all. As far as building a practice, go back, you can thank the American Board of Orthopedic Surgery. I mean, there's just not that many of us at the end of the day. And so everybody's busy. You would, almost no matter where you go or what you do, you're going to be busy day one.
I would say a couple of things. One, remember I told you about those lists of things about location, et cetera, but how the group is. And also talk to a younger member of the group and say, what's it been like for you for the last 2 years? They'll be candid with you and they'll tell you what it's like. And I think there's some places where people, like I'm explaining to you, really are interested in mentoring. And in the end, whether you pick a hospital or a private practice, all of them want to recruit the best people and retain them. And so a lot of these arrangements vary and change. And once you get in, if you say there was something about my deal that really was bad, you'll become a change agent and you'll say, we're going to change this because we need to get the best and brightest people to come. That's what I was trying to do in Lynchburg. So feel out the ethos of the place. And there are places, and it's a highly competitive environment where people are potentially viewing you as competition, and you don't want that. And if you get that vibe, you can either tell them or not, but you know that's not what you're looking for. And there's ways to sort of smell that out, including talking to people that have just joined the group. They'll be candid.
And we have young people in the group, but we also have young women in our group who would be happy to talk to you, just so you know.
And I actually, as CMO, I do that. There was one person who joined at Southwest, which is sort of rural, and I connected her with another doctor that was using telehealth with great expertise in Washington. And the CEO came to me and said, who cares about the telehealth? It was so cool that you got these two young people talking to each other. And this one, I mean, not the one in Washington was older, but those sort of personal relationships. The other thing in the EMR thing is I take the old guys who are technologically phobic and put them with the young people who don't know how to take care of complex complications and problems. And they so enjoy each other. In other words, the older person says, you know, hey, here's what you do with a complicated patient. And then the guy's got fat fingers and he can't do it. And the young person goes, do this. Any other questions?
What are some difficulties you could run into going from private practice to academic medicine and academic medicine to private practice and go back and forth?
Yeah, back and forth. Interesting. I would tell you that when I was here, I was offered the chance to stay in academics, and for like 4 years, I kept ruining the fact that I went into private practice. I think you can do it, but I think you sort of have to keep this is just personal, sort of a fluency with what's going on in academics, et cetera, but I don't think anything is beyond your possibilities. And so although we're trying to arm you with the ability to make good decisions, not everybody's going to make a great decision, and things are not going to be 100% clear to you as you leave. And so you have to retain the notion that you have the ability to switch. And then I would refer back to my values. And if I say I'm locked in and my family's happy, et cetera, but this is not really who I want to be. I'm not in resonant frequency with this. Something's wrong. Then stay true to your values, figure it out, and make the switch. Have the courage. What would you say?
Yeah, well, I've seen more people go from our group to VCU than VCU to our group, for what that's worth. And they go for various reasons, but you know, a good resource person to talk to. Does Chris Foster come here anymore? He's gone.
Greg Dobson comes now.
Yeah. So before Greg, there was before Greg Dobson, there was Chris Foster, and Chris was in private practice in Richmond, and then ultimately decided to go to VCU, and then came here as part of that structure. He'd be happy to talk to you, but I think you can always make a change. And most of the time, the non-competes and things like that do not come into effect because it's usually a mutual agreement, and non-competes are really almost unenforceable. But part of it is, I mean, I think it's really helpful to go through the process, everything Cap was talking about now, because to the extent that you can, you want to make the right decision the first time. And you just kind of have to say.
But don't stress too much. I mean, like really, I mean, we're trying to give you the things that are important to think about. Maybe it's self-evident, but again, we're trying to give you some good ideas. But you guys are very talented people. You're very well trained. You'll be a precious commodity. People will want you.
Right. It's a what is that called? It's a seller's market.
What else can we tell you?
So for them, the chief residents, the fellows who are looking to get jobs, like how do you think that you go about the job? Like how do they make themselves known to your group, for instance?
Oh,
Like,
I would
reach
out early. I think.
Because a lot of jobs are posted on the AOS. They might be in rural,
Yeah.
whatever, but how do you get a good orthopedic enrichment?
I'm going to let Chris speak, but I would pick a look. First, I would do the location thing. I think just, think about where you're going to be happy. It's the type of environment. Maybe you're happier urban, maybe you're happier rural. Figure it out. And then begin to say, is there a geographic part of the country I like? And then I would be aggressive. Like if somebody doesn't have a job posting, say, look, this community to me seems really good. This is my training. I'm interested. And more times than not, sometimes they'll just say, we don't have a place for you, et cetera. But a lot of times they'll say, wow, this is a really good person and we got to find a way to make a place. And then be patient, like you're not going to walk in the door and necessarily be the busiest surgeon with a great reputation. When I came to town, nobody knew who the heck I was and they were going to another guy for their joint replacements. But over time it changes. And so be patient and, stick and it'll all turn out. Chris.
Yeah. So a lot of it just comes down to figuring out who you are. So I went to Duke for med school, and back then the two hot things to go in were surgery or internal medicine. And I went in I had an advisor. I only met with him one time for 5 minutes of my 4 years there. And I went in and he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I don't know. I like surgery and I like internal medicine. And he looked at me and he said, that is the dumbest thing I've ever had anybody tell me in my entire career. He said, those two things are totally different. Do you want to just be going in and to work every day and just looking at numbers and and doing spinal taps, or do you want to be going into surgery and And he made me feel like this tall. And after I crawled out of his office, I walked down the hall and I said, well, I want to do surgery. I mean, he really helped me. And so if you can kind of look at yourself and say, do I want to be teaching? Do I want to be out in a community? All those things, where do I want to live? And kind of picture yourself in the future. You can always be wrong, but the better you are doing it, the better chance you have of making a good choice.
But one of the things that we're trying to teach you is agency. So when we talk about team building, we're saying you're the master of your OR. It was really important. I had a 60-40 rule that meant as long as 60% of the people in my OR were part of my team and I knew them and they knew me and I had gotten them ready for the surgery and 40% were learners or new people, et cetera, we were great. If you flip the ratio, the patient was in trouble. And so I was insistent that I had my teams, and I could be a real pain in the patooski when I went to the OR and these things weren't the way I wanted them. I was, hard to live with. So you have agency. You have agency to build when we're talking about the office, the templates, I've got a whole nother lecture on team-based care of how the office and the EHR can work for you and make you really efficient and master, et cetera. You have agency. You have agency in getting a job. You don't necessarily have to just go to the places. You can pick places and put the word out. Maybe they say, we don't have anything, but we know there's other place that does. So don't feel like you're constrained.
I would say that 90% I'm guessing, but not 90 to 95%, if not more, of your faculty here is happy. And I would say that 95% of us are happy. So
it'll turn out.
It'll turn out.
What else can we discuss?
You guys got it.
Sorry, one more question. I'm also one of the chiefs. Just looking at the data, it looks like they're 50% change to jobs very early on. Is there anything that you can point to that we're doing wrong? Or because a lot of the things that you're talking about, I'm sure that a lot of other people have been told too, in terms of what to look for in your first job. Is there anything that we're ignoring or not looking at or doing wrong as new trainees looking for a first job?
I'm just thinking about the people that have left my practice. One came and was not very well trained, surprisingly. One came and wanted more than my community had to offer, and also was just basically saying, make sure my salary is really high. And this person was actually getting into so much debt because they said, I want a big salary, but I don't want to do the work. And you have to sort of marry all those things. It's those kind of things. That's the reason where I think stressing some of these fundamentals. If you get some of the blocking and tackling correct, it's going to give you lots of latitude to be patient and wait and figure things out. I think, like in human nature, if you don't get some of this stuff straight, those stressors at the bottom of the pyramid can sort of mess you up, and all of a sudden things start, getting tangled and fouled up at the top. I mean, that's a little bit big for you, but yeah, what would you say?
Yeah, I'd say it's a little bit about picking a residency, like picking a residency program. When you were in med school, you knew you had to go to visit a bunch of places, right? And this place feels right. This place doesn't feel right. And so if you, try to, by judging who you are, pick your places, then try to go to as many places as they'll let you go to.
You really got to check with your family. If your family's not happy, it doesn't matter how great the job is, you're not going to be happy. So
Your spouse's hometown is always a good place to go.
In 5 years, they work within 50 miles of your mother-in-law.
We have a question from the audience from Wells Stewart, Recon Fellow. Try to talk. I think we can hear you, Wells.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Yeah. So my question is how much overhead is too much overhead? I know a group like Ortho Virginia's got pretty high overhead, and as a young guy potentially joining that practice, I guess how much overhead is too much overhead?
I would just say that in Ortho Virginia, actually it varies. So we are an amalgamation of regions, and each region retains some sort of individual elements. Overhead always seems high. There's an organization of like office managers where they have metrics, et cetera. So again, you can bring data to this thing and see what the overhead is like. The accounting makes a difference. So different places figure overhead differently. And so you think you're comparing apples to apples, but you're not. So that may be a little bit vague, but you can, I tried to do due diligence in terms of legal agreements and also say, can I look at the books, quote unquote, and understand a little bit about how this organization works. I think when you do your original, I asked our CEO, and there are things that you can understand, like whether the practice is efficient. Also, how does that overhead impact you? If you're more productive, does that overhead go down? There's a bunch of accounting and financial things to just become a little bit aware of. Go ahead.
Yeah, so one of our former COOs or chief operating officers was a guy named Jim Perkins, and he viewed his job, one of his jobs, in addition to improving quality of life and things like that, but one of his jobs, he would always say, is improving physician income. And he would say that I don't care if I have your overhead go up a lot, as long as your income goes up a lot more. And so you have to just weigh that thinking sometimes, quote, you spend more to make more.
It's not as much of a black and white question sometimes as it would seem.
So I really appreciate the wisdom you guys have shared, and I hope these guys do too. One of the things I wonder about is how you view hospital employed jobs in a general sense, because from my perspective, it seems like you lose all the leverage as a physician. They have all the cards. They can dictate the terms of the future. What help you get that 60-40 ratio in the OR can be at their will and not compete and all this. They have all the cards in my view. They dangle a big starting salary, and I just think it can be hard for these guys to navigate that. And what do you see as maybe to counter that with the word in our profession?
I put that Jack Burt slide in because we don't live in that world, and I wanted to give you some additional information. My sense is that hospital employment, you do lose potential freedom. We know people that get there, they get a high RVU number. That's the thing you're negotiating for. And then after a while, they're not happy and they want to leave, and their family settled in, and the non-compete means they can't leave, and it makes them unhappy. I do think that they want to recruit and retain, and I don't know, what would you say?
So I don't know of any orthopedic big groups that have been bought by hospitals, personally myself. But I've watched lots of other groups, cardiology groups and family practice groups and pulmonary groups. And whenever they're bought, over the years because of quality reasons. And all the ones who didn't leave town went to work for a hospital.
But we don't want to be pejorative. I mean, again, we're not living in that world, and I would say it would be good to have somebody come who lives in that world who can tell you from personal experience and not just, our gut feeling.
Right. I'm sure there are plenty of people who are happy.
Got a question from the crowd. Mark Romness, you're up.
Yeah, hi. I want to bring some up. Also, another trend in orthopedic practices is being bought out by private equity firms. And I'm asking if Ortho Virginia has been approached by any private equity firms and how you guys have addressed that.
No, we haven't, but yeah, my brother's oral surgery practice was. I think that it's a money-making deal for people, and again, I think basically you sacrifice autonomy and the ability to control your own destiny for an early payoff. I still think that even in this complex world, you can put yourself in a situation where you have the ability to be a builder and create something for community. You're not creating it for yourself. You're creating it for all the people that you're serving over a career. What do you think?
Well, I just know what's happened, like over the years happened with emergency room doctors. It used to be a really popular field to go. I guess it's still popular to go into, but they were all independent practices, and ultimately they all sold out, and now they're all commodities.
The sweet spot is going to be not a small mom and pop, because there's such a cost of doing business, and you don't have the ability to meet all the regulatory stuff, et cetera, if you're too small. If you get too big, perhaps you become just sort of a cog in a machine, et cetera. And can you find that place that's in the sweet spot? That's what we're talking. The thing that we showed you, the map, those are members of the Ortho Forum. They're the Ortho Indies, the Ortho Virginias. Are these independent MSK medical providers going to be able to figure this out so that they can survive, but they also give you the opportunity to realize your potentials? That's the open question. And I think it's a very fluid environment right now. People are merging into these big groups, and time will tell. You can investigate the Ortho Forum if you want to know who these independent MSK people are.
Yeah, from what I've seen from the private equity deals, a lot of the stuff we've seen presented nationally, there's a benefit short term, but I think the long term benefit is just not there for the practice, and especially not there for the patient.
They're in it to make money, and every time somebody takes a % out of what you're doing, et cetera, it's going to a different place. It's not going to patient care.
No.
That's what I talked about. When you get all these things, ask yourself, is this good for my patients? You get tempted. The private equity, maybe I'll get a huge payout. Is this going to be good for my patients in the long run? It's really orienting.
Good point, thanks.
one of the other things I feel like in academics is, especially here, like everything is very, very subspecialized versus in practice, we may be doing much more than what we're fellowship trained in. Have you seen your practices change and kind of filter down into more specific, or has it just changed over the years?
You got something?
Yeah, you know first.
All right, in Lynchburg, actually, we still take trauma call and there's no other place to go. So pretty much when you come, you have to do a wide variety of things.
Can't you just send them up here?
We send most of them to UVA, but we still do a couple of trauma cases in Lynchburg. But anyway, we have a mentoring program where people come in and maybe you don't feel as strong doing some of the stuff that you're going to see in the ER, et cetera. So we combine, this is what I'm talking about. You're brought in with a mentor. And they take call with you for the first two, like the first number of cases and make sure that you feel comfortable, et cetera. It's a scary feeling to sort of feel like you're out there and you're going to be called on to do things. And maybe you haven't done that many pediatric elbow fractures, et cetera, and you're not as comfortable. And then we always make sure that there's things that are not as emergent and you can go to your colleagues and get the support you need. But you want to go a place where they do that. What do you think?
That's good.
But yeah, there's more subspecialty.
It varies by
concentration.
location is the way I would say it.
Yeah, that's the way to say it.
If you go to, so just Northern Virginia, most all of the doctors up there still do everything. They may do a lot of knee replacements, they'll still do lots of other stuff. Richmond is very subspecialized. I mean, it's hard to make it as a general orthopedic surgeon in Richmond.
And also with the market, if you go there and you're doing something and nobody really wants it, you're going to have to find other things to do. But once you get to the point where everybody that wants a knee replacement comes to you, you're going to be doing a lot of knee replacements.
All right, thanks, guys. So, Dr. Young, Dr. Eschenroeder, we have 4 ties for you.
Whoa.
This is yours. This is yours. This is yours.
Thank you.
Well, it was an honor for us to be here. Thank you very much.
We actually feel grateful that you guys are interested in hearing from us. So thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, this is really, really helpful. So I think you guys would be willing to share your contact information with anyone who's interested in asking more questions.
Sure.
And so I've also recorded this, and so if you guys want to come back and watch it. But really honestly, all you will be alumni one day too. And so it's one of our best resources we have as residents here at UVA is to have a distinguished alumni like these. And so I just want to say thanks again, and we'll hopefully see you a lot more. So
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for inviting us.
That was awesome. Thanks, Chris. Really, really good.
How do we do?
Thanks so much. Fantastic.